All right. Hey, Bradley, how you going?
How are we going, Patrick?
All good. Welcome to week 5, and the residential school went well, so congratulations to everybody. That was excellent. And of course, as we move on, they've all been assessed now, so that part of your life is, you can get that part of your life back. With the assignment 1, I'm still going through question 1. I think I've got about another 6 to mark, and as I say, I consistently mark question 1, and been marking question 1, and that's been good. And again, it's been quite interesting. There's about 4 different methods that have been used in terms of, like a matrix method to solve something, or even complex numbers. So it's been curious in some ways, so that's good. So it's nice that people have tackled different ways. And it is that type of problem that in actual fact it does open it up, because it is a mongrel problem, to be honest. So there are some approaches. Spoiler alert, obviously if you haven't demonstrated your mathematics, big surprise, as I've been saying all the way through term, and obviously modelling from the lecture problems, solutions of them, and the tutorial ones, and of course also all the my solution, your solution, plus discussions that we've had in workshops. So, spoiler alert: if you're not providing and demonstrating the mathematics, obviously I can't really mark you on the magical appearance of numbers. So as we go through, look, that's a common thing that happens in the first assignment. And then typically people, rocket ahead in the second assignment. So, don't lose sleep over the moment. And again, it's a spoiler alert. When you get it back, what I also do is I cycle through everybody. I give everybody a telephone call, and we talk about your feedback and just see how you're going. As I say, the whole point of this is that I'm here to, get you to do the best you can. And sometimes that, that is frustrating, because you think, oh God, I've done the mathematics. I plugged it in my calculator. I got the answer. Yeah, that's true. That is true. But however, I am. The learning outcomes of this unit does include that mathematical processing. So we'll talk about that as I say, I'll cycle through and give you a ring. Oh, okay. All right, well, week 5, let's have a look. Over there, let's go and pick up the. Put that over there. Okay, so you can see that okay? Okay, good, excellent.
Yeah, got that, Patrick. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to have a look at our workshops, and as I say, week 5, believe it or not. So let's go and have a look at our selected slides. Oh, good old block diagrams. Now, again, I probably did say it on the video, but I'll say it on this video. Block diagrams, wow, wildly interesting, fantastic stuff. Yeah, great. I'm glad I finished it. Now, the point of the matter is with block diagrams is that, like some industries, my guys, this is very important, and they're interesting little ways. There's some little different techniques here to talk about ways to represent control systems. Sometimes, again, this is kind of inverted commas, conscious raising. Sometimes it's like historical, which might sound like a weird thing to say, but in terms of developing, the background knowledge for a unit, or, a content area, the textbook goes through this, of course, but the reality is that it might be just something you will never ever use again. So, welcome to university, you learn a lot of useless stuff, but in the real world, you'll probably never use it again. And that's what happens. Welcome to life. So this, if you like, block diagrams is a little bit like that. Oh, how interesting, but sure there's more interesting things. So in some ways, with week 5, chapter 5, look, my advice to you is read through it and go, okay, righto then, and try the problem. Don't get me wrong, try things and just go, okay, righto then. But look, if you, if you sort of have a quick glance through it and move on to something else, one, I can tell you now, block diagrams are not on the exam, because it is just an interesting technique. So look, as I say, just to give you some breathing space, it goes through some different topologies and how interesting, and how you can basically take a, inverted commas, complex system, recognize some things like, oh, there's some cascading things, there's some feedback things. And so what you're trying to do is to take this graphical, diagrammatic figure, whatever you want to call it, and basically represent the transfer function. So instead of doing algebraically, you're going to do, well, you do sort of, they call it block algebra, but all you're doing is taking that down and drawing it into a nice pretty diagram. So this is all the background theory part of it, blah blah blah, and then this just shows you how you reduce it down. It keeps getting reduced. So there you go, that's what it is. So graphically, diagrammatically, that's what you're doing.
Excuse me, Patrick.
Yep.
We don't have your workings in front of us. We've just got the Moodle website.
Oh, beg your pardon. Oh, that's weird. Oh, thank you. Okay.
No worries. There we go.
That it? Even better. Okay. So let me just.
Yeah, we've got you now, Patrick.
Yep.
No, I've got you. I can see you.
Fantastic. I'm just checking out I've actually pushed the recording button, because it's been a long week.
That's it.
Well, I'm a bit kind of like
No, you're right. Yeah, no, we've got your screen now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. So block diagrams. So there's these little different topologies, cascading and feedback and junctions and stuff. So, but as I say, look, in all honesty, if you just flick through this particular section this week and move on, you're not going to. It's not going to ruin your life and control systems. Believe me. So I go through very quickly, and so the whole idea is to get it down to this transfer function. Okay. Then what happens is that there's just some introduction of these terms. Look, these nice little definitions, but again, the functionality, the use of these, the calculation, the application is going to come up in about another week or so, and you'll have to do calculations with them. So again, yeah, interesting definitions there. Thanks very much. That's good. And again, this is just about reducing things down. So, and then it just talks about, these are the different stages, different states, I suppose, of a system. And it does tell you stuff when we come into stability. So what we're talking about here, this tells us things about what's going to happen to the system. Like, will it oscillate? Will it actually, operate appropriately? What do we do if it's over damped? And so therefore, then you have to, twiddle with it. You have to do something to make the control system settle. That type of stuff. We'll be talking about that as we go through. So again, this is conscious raising, just so you get the terminology, hear the words, that type of thing. So just have a read through and see what the different states are, and we will talk about that. Then you go through, and again, another form, instead of the block diagrams, is a signal flow form. So again, it's just some fancy definitions here about you've got a node and you've got the actual path, etc., etc. And very, very quickly it becomes a bit of a tongue twister, because you start doing things like, the forward path gain of the reverse path. No, I'm joking, but you get the forward path. So again, this is interesting, an interesting format. So you get a complicated system, and all we're going to do is take it down, follow this due process, get it down, and ultimately we're going to find that that's what our system looks like. Okay, interesting. For some people, might be able to glance at that and go, oh yeah, okay, that's all right. As I say, the reality is that in industry, a particular industry might have, you might have an old guy, well, very common, an old guy, that, he might go, oh, it's very important that we do these signal flow diagrams. And then you might have an old guy that just goes, oh, thank God we never had to use those things. So, it's an interesting thing, it's useful perhaps, but don't lose sleep over it. Then there's another rule, Mason's rule, which again, all you're doing is looking at techniques to take a complex circuit, schematic like that, and reducing it down so that you can ultimately, take it through step by step, basically, and blow it out for you, all the way down, blah, 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 and you can, almost there, you can represent the system, very simply by that, okay, simply in inverted commas. So again, as I say, it's curious, interesting, blah, blah, blah. And also, we've been talking about state equations. So if I've got a state equation, can I also do that? Yes, I can. So I've got an algebraic form. Can I rejig that? Yes, I can. Follow that process, follow the process, follow the process, follow the process, follow the process. And I get a beautiful diagram that looks like that. Now, okay, that's fine. So you, as a quick lookup thing, that might be useful to you. It may not be. So again, as I say, some industries might, it might be interesting for them to do it. I have to say that in my experience of talking to graduates and bumping up against interested people, signal flow diagrams and block diagrams are curiosities and interesting, but again, thank you very much. So that's analog stuff. The digital stuff, again, there's a little bit there, and I'm not going to launch too much into it. Again, as you might imagine, there's similarities of cascading and feedback and stuff like that. And in reality, that's all you need to be able to do. You just be able to recognize. And as you might imagine, there are similarities with regards to the analog stuff. So as I mentioned, for this particular week, it's a week where you could sort of suddenly, you could suddenly say, okay, that's fine. Yeah, interesting. Don't spend hours on it. Flick through, look at the tutorial problems and move on. It won't be on the exam. So, just use it as a bit of a, use it to your advantage as a catch-up week. So we look at let's go back now, let's go and look at the say the tube problems. So I go back. There's another week coming up too. We'll do errors and that type of stuff. You'll find that's a really nice, easy week as well. So you've got a couple of weeks coming up that you can just punch ahead and just move ahead, and it's not overtaxing. And then we'll get into some things to do with stability, and then, that's not taxing, but you'll find that gets, well, again, we're going to show you a technique that you have to play around with. So, but there's a couple of weeks where steady state errors and the block diagram things, it's like, it's inverted commas a bit, well, I'll say light on, but you know, I mean, you don't have to, you know, spend hours doing it. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. I'll try week 5. Again, as you saw, there won't be any digital problems because I didn't ask you to do anything digital. It's only introductory unit. So again, all we're doing is playing around, looking at this complex system and thinking, oh, can I recognize some things? This one might be a bit easier, you know, well, you got feedback stuff. You could cascade those two together. Once you do that, you've only got one block. You can look at these things and you know, cascade some things together. So that's the whole point. Those two, that's it. And then draw a signal flow diagrams. I'll give you some state equation format. And then again, good old Mason's rule. You've got this seemingly complicated thing that you're able to then check out from Mason's rule. So they're the questions. Let's go look at the solutions. So again, as I say, interesting, go through, and then you've got your little blocks. So all I'm saying is that, well, you can cascade those together. So those 3 suddenly become this. And of course, you've got some algebra to do, so we can, again, it's not too difficult in that context. Then play around with a little bit more. Oh, that's it, they're not complete. So all you're doing is trying to get that diagrammatic thing into some number form, which is your transfer function, and then you can obviously use that to analyze your system. Likewise with this one, complicated looking diagram. Again, this is using core block algebra, so you're able to manipulate the blocks. So the first manipulation is taking those 2, they're cascaded. So cascade means you just simply add them together, and then you look for another pattern, or look at those 2 there perhaps. I think that's the next one I did, yeah. So you take those 2 and go, oh, they're cascaded, so again, you just add them together. So that obviously is starting to look simpler. And then you can see I can combine those 2 together, so I've done that. Blah, blah, and then you can, so again, you end up with something in inverted commas that's either in algebraic form or in a similar form for whatever use you want to use it for. Number 3, good old state space, play around with the state space, and again, get it in the correct form, and then all you're doing is representing this set of equations in a diagram. Mason's rule, again, this gets excitingly interesting very, very quickly. You've got forward paths and reverse paths. Yeah, very interesting. And then, as I say, it looks complicated, but it's just because. And then, as I say, you know, really, in inverted commas, is that really less complicated than looking at this figure? I don't know. Maybe not. Depends on you. But as I say, I'll repeat for the 15th time: don't lose sleep over it, and don't become caught up with it. So that's the lecture. That's the tutorial. Normally, we then start talking about laboratories, but hey, we finished those. So you do have a life to get on with, so that's good. That's pretty much it. So take it as it is this week and just go, yep, thanks very much, very interesting, conscious raising, move on. And then as we say, you've got next week, you know, we call it the student free week, which is a bit laughable. And likewise with you guys, you know, they tell you that it's a catch-up week or, you know, a holiday week. Yeah, there's no holidays. So look, I wish you all the best with that. Bradley, is there any other questions you want to ask or anything you want to clarify?
No, I think I'm right, Patrick. I'll just go through those diagrams. I did find Mason's pretty difficult to try and follow when I read through it. But I was,
because it's like you take a forward path and then you got to take the reverse. So it's yeah, as I say, please don't lose sleep over it.
Yeah, not very intuitive, but yeah, the signal flow I didn't find too bad. Finding my way around there. So well, what generally happens in industry, Patrick? Do we normally just have more independent systems that all sort of come together eventually, do we? And we monitor those independent systems more separately.
Yeah.
And then how they feed into the overall one later on. Is that right?
Exactly right. These are just representations, and the representations of the transfer function. So, you know, the transfer function in these days, you know, things are so modularized. So, you know, you can buy software that just punch 3 things in and the numbers come out the other end, or, you know, yourself, you're looking at the, you know, the big screen at work, and basically it's telling you the temperature's rising and something's flashing at you. So it's already been calculated. So that's what that screen does. It's got the magic numbers all behind it. Or if it's a schematic, it's already done it, and that's what's up on the screen. So a lot of those things are, if you were programming or you know, creating that yourself as a functionality, well, that's good. But to be honest, it's not a rarity, but it's going to be, you know, less opportunity or chance that you as an individual would do that. And again, if you got some old, when I say an old bloke, I just mean that somebody that's old school, if I can put it that way. They may get out an envelope and scribble on and show it to you, but most of the time, I haven't come across it, to be honest. So sometimes these things are historical just to demonstrate that just another way to represent.
Okay, no worries. I think I'm right, Patrick. It's just a matter of keeping up and pushing on through. So, yeah. Yep.
Great. Well, as I say, the assignment, I've almost finished marking question 1. I'd have to say by midweek next week, something like that, you'll definitely get it back within that 2-week grid, so that you've got that. And then, of course, we can catch up in the following week and we'll talk about that feedback and clarify that with everyone as well. All right. Well, thanks, Bradley. You take care. All the best for you this week and the family and everyone. So,
will do. Yep. Thanks so much for your efforts down there at residential school as well. And we'll have a nice break. You might have a break.
Another assignment coming in on Friday, so
okay.
After the break, it'll probably be a Kit Kat break. It'll be
okay. All right. Okay. Thanks, Patrick. We'll see you after next week.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.